Hey, everybody, welcome back to Wynne's World of Numerology, a language that I believe our soul already knows and, when studied carefully, can lead us to soulganizing our lives rather than organizing our lives around that pesky little ego. I hope to be your self growth facilitator today. And if you're suffering in any way, I hope to help you reorganize the way you are feeling and experiencing your life. Today, we're going to deep dive into the seventh number symbol, which is seven. And you most likely haven't studied the number seven quite this way before, even if you're familiar with numerology. So let's get started. In previous episodes, you have learned about the definition of the pure forms of the energy symbols 1 through 6, and how our current state of consciousness will be either bringing out their highest potentials or lowest potentials in our charts. Just to review, the number one again is about new beginnings and making a masculine type of impact or mark on the world. The number two is the feminine partner supporting the masculine one initiative. The number three is the one masculine and two feminine energies coming together to make a baby. So the three energy is that curious childlike energy that we have. Then the number four will be a little more serious, coming down to organize and scatter that, organize that scattered childlike energy into digestible, ordered buckets of information for us to be efficient as humans. And then the number five will arrive in order to break up that restriction and break free and seek new adventures and change. And after all that fun and adventure, the six will now be ready to take on additional responsibility for his or her fellow man, to care for others, and is the first time we see that sort of mothering, nurturing type of energy. Today, we're going to focus on the seven, which is our first attempt to see life as sort of a sacred, mystical endeavor. Lots of mystery to behold and reflect on for a greater understanding of who we are in this great big universe. So let's dive in. And the way that we normally dive in is we draw the solar cross, which is universally seen all over the world and over a long periods of time as a sacred, symbol. So we get the circle and the cross. And when we create the cross, we now get time and space, and we get these four quadrants of the human, which is the spirit, the body, the emotional body, and the mental body. And the seven is drawn like this. So it comes across the mental, reflecting energy, and then comes down to make it useful in the world. So the seven is about moving into the next realm of possibility, right? So we've done all these human things, and now it's where the visible world is going to meet up with the invisible world. So spiritually, which is where we're going to start out here, right? So we come down, and the first thing that takes a hold in the earth's plane is the spirit. And the spirit, it shows the seven as a sacred sort of number. There are 7 days of the week. There are 7 colors in the rainbow. There are 7 chakras. There are 7 deadly sins or virtues. And there are 7 musical notes on the scale. So the seven is sort of, again, crossing this bridge of like the seven seems like the end number, but there's clearly more at the end of the rainbow. In the Bible, spiritually, on the seventh day, God ended his work and he rested on the seventh day from all of the work which he had done. And then God blessed that seventh day and sanctified it as a time for resting and reflecting on the perfection of what he had made. So the seven spiritually in your chart is asking you to reflect on the perfection that already is and was created by God, recognizing that God is the worker and that we are just the experiencer or observer of that work, and it comes through us. So it's a time to develop sort of an inner knowing that you can rest and reflect on the good works of the world that you have been a part of, but ultimately giving all credit towards God. And again, the 7 days of the week are an interesting cycle of completion and should be honored in some way, the work that you've done over the week. So that's the spiritual side of the seven. And then here we have the body. And the body, again, is the sacred holder of the soul. and keeping it firmly planted here on earth. So, just for that reason alone, the body should be revered for its perfection and being able to do that. On a more basic level, you might have heard the concept of maybe like the runner's high. Some people are not running just for the physical aspect of it, but to sort of create that inner feeling and inner knowing that we are more than the body. The seven will also ask the body to stop running and sit down and be meditative or contemplative. And for some mystery, we need the body to settle and to allow us to do that reflection. All right, next up, we're going to move into emotions as we move around clockwise here. And the seven is really interesting that it can ask for us to harness the power of emotions and generate actually a form of healing from that. So, if you've ever been to a Reiki master, Reiki, the word itself, breaks down into a seven, as you can see here, breaking down each letter into one of the number symbols, and then the vowels and the consonants together equal 34. 3 plus 4 is 7. So, again, the seven energy is harnessing the emotional energy out of thin air. Basically, your emotional subtle body is outside of the physical body, and it can support the healing of another, sometimes through physical ailment or their own emotional stuck energy. But if you know about Reiki, they use their hands to help move sort of the invisible energies, and that the invisible world does have the capacity to actually physically make changes in the body when done with a Reiki master. All right. Lastly, we're going to go through the mental quadrant, which is really what the seven is mostly interested in. The seven, again, wants to harness the mind's capability and release the five senses. So, to sort of bring that third eye into our awareness. And the seven can sort of reflect on how we treat others or ourselves with like that namaste attitude, which is the light in me sees the light in you. Again, we're not physically seeing the light, but we are mentally experiencing the invisible energies of the world. And it becomes very real to the seven. So that we're reflecting mentally, we're doing it at rest, we're contemplating and integrating the mental capacity to see how the physical realm is reflecting the mental light of our third eyes or high intelligence or creativity or things like that, that we are making visible into the world. It's coming from our mental capacities. So the seven mentally will see that we truly create the visible world from the invisible. And that's usually by reflecting on what we already see existing around us. All right. So next, after we've gone all the way around the solar cross, we usually talk about karma. And when under the influence of the seven, numerology does create karma. As you see, 1 plus 6, it's the 16. It gives us a seven, and that's when numerology calculates karma. So many of us who observe someone else under this karma will describe these people as those people who self-sabotage or are the cause of their own undoing. They usually experience kind of like, how can this keep happening to you? Like lose loving relationships or friendships in sudden or abrupt ways or through some kind of personality conflict. Basically, any kind of permanency is difficult to maintain under the seven because it's trying to reach the idea of impermanence itself, right? So the seven is teaching the idea of impermanence, the mystery of how life works, things come and go out of your life. But if a person is in a 7/16 karma, they will often look to others as confusing or appearing very different or quirky, and at the very worst, self-centered. And self-centeredness comes from the ego, right? If we're not under the karma of the seven, we are under the psychological ego. And the ego does not like this sort of idea that there's an invisible world that we can reflect on and garner from, because our society promotes external doing and consuming material physical goods. So when the ego reflects on that, if it doesn't feel that its life is perfect, it's going to be filled with lack. It's going to be filled with fear of missing out. It's going to be very judgmental. It's going to say, because I wasn't perfect, I didn't get that job. It can get obsessed with being impure, It can get obsessed with being damaged by past trauma or abuse. It's always looking at the past as something that is victimized it and can't move forward. It's somehow damaged, right? So some people will even religiously consider themselves a sinner and must be forgiven by someone outside of them, like a priest. Again, that's what the ego sort of does to kind of make us imperfect and always chasing this idea of perfection physically that cannot be achieved or maintained. The ego will, again, not want us to see that it is really the invisible world. It will be concentrating on the physicalness of the world and its imperfections. But the good news is free will always gives us the ability to reverse that upside down relationship with ourselves, because truly your soul is perfection. And the idea of the seven is to connect with the perfection of what we are and do that through reflection, meditation, contemplation, recognizing truly that you are already a perfect soul. You're just having a very imperfect human experience. And so is everyone else here on earth. And just kind of having that inner knowing that there is a bigger picture and that the invisible world is actually more real than the visible world can bring in this feeling of joy and peace and appreciation just for the experience of having a messy human experience. Ultimately, faith is the invisible energy that we want to garner and be the highest form of trust that we would experience under the seven. All right. Thanks for hanging in there. If you want to go deeper and learn about how the seven may be showing up in your personal chart, you can book a session with me to go over your questions or to get a full numerology chart reading. And as always, included in a session is access to a free copy of my ebook, Soulganize Your Life. You can also just go to soulganize.com for more information or to connect there. As always, all the links to any episode notes are below. Stay free again until I see you again in the next video. Thanks.